What would you do if saving your people meant becoming the most hunted woman in the realm? When Brisenna's village faced annihilation, she made a choice that would change everything. She walked into the Wolf King's camp alone, armed with nothing but poison and desperation, and killed his 3 most feared warriors. Now, Alpha King Dacron has sworn an oath that echoes across every mountain and valley. He will find her, he will capture her, and he will make her pay. But when the hunter finally corners his prey, he discovers that some women are far more dangerous than any wolf. This is a story of blood, survival, and the thin line between vengeance and something far more complicated. Before we continue, kindly subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The smoke still rose from the southern villages when Brisenna made her decision. She stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley, watching the dark plumes twist into the winter sky like the fingers of dying gods. 3 settlements had burned in as many days. The wolf packs were moving north, and her village of the Myra would be next. You can't be serious. Orlen grabbed her arm, his weathered face tight with fear. The village elder had seen 50 winters, but tonight he looked ancient. Brisenna, this is madness. Going to them is suicide. She pulled her arm free, still watching the smoke. Waiting here is also suicide. Just slower. The warriors will fight. We have walls, we have farmers with sharpened sticks. Brisenna finally turned to face him, and something in her eyes made him step back. Orlen, I've counted our able fighters. 23 men. 16 women who can hold a weapon. Against how many wolves? Hundreds? Thousands? The old man's shoulders sagged. They both knew the truth. The scattered clans had always lived in the shadow of the wolf kingdoms, paying tribute, staying small, staying quiet. But something had changed in the southern territories. The wolf lords were expanding, crushing everything in their path, and the scattered clans were being wiped from existence. Then we run, Orlen whispered. We take what we can carry and disappear into the northern wastes. To die of cold instead of teeth? Brisenna shook her head. No. I have another way. She'd been planning this for 3 days, ever since the refugees from Kelmar had stumbled into the Myra with their stories. Stories of the Wolf King's inner circle. Stories of the 3 warriors who led his vanguard, the ones called the Bloodsworn. Griver the Cruel, who wore a necklace of finger bones. Tomek the Red, whose sword had never known a clean edge. And Asander the Silent, who killed without sound or mercy. These 3 were always first into battle. These 3 were Dacron's favored commanders. These 3 had burned the southern villages and were now marching toward the Myra. And Brisenna was going to kill them. You've lost your mind, Orlen said when she told him. But his voice held a strange note of hope. Even if you could get close to them, even if you could somehow strike before they tore you apart, the king would destroy us for it. Dacron would make an example of the Myra that would be remembered for generations. He's going to destroy us anyway. Brisenna moved away from the cliff's edge, heading back toward the village. This way, at least we have a chance. Without his Bloodsworn, his vanguard will hesitate. The other wolf lords will see weakness. It might buy our people time to scatter, to hide, to survive. And you? Orlen called after her. What happens to you? She didn't answer. There was no point. They both knew she wouldn't be coming back. The next morning, Brisenna walked down the mountain path alone. She carried nothing but a small pack and wore the rough-spun dress of a village woman. Her dark hair was unbound, hanging to her waist. She looked like a refugee, like prey, like someone running from the smoke and fire. That was exactly what she wanted. The wolf camp sprawled across the valley floor like a living thing. Hundreds of tents, thousands of warriors. Brisenna watched from the tree line as the camp stirred with the dawn. Wolves in their animal forms prowled the perimeter, massive beasts with eyes that gleamed gold in the early light. Among them walked the 2-legged wolves, humans who could shift their forms, who wore their power like a second skin. She'd studied them her whole life. Every child in the scattered clans learned the ways of wolves, learned to recognize the signs of a pack nearby, learned when to hide and when to run. But Brisenna had learned more than most. She'd learned their hierarchies, their customs, their pride. And pride was what would get her close enough. Stop right there. The sentry appeared from behind a tent, a young wolf in human form with a spear leveled at her chest. This is the war camp of King Dacron. State your business or die where you stand. Briseina raised her hands slowly, letting fear show in her face. It wasn't hard. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Please. Please, I need sanctuary. My village burned. I have nowhere else to go. The sentry's eyes narrowed. We're not running a charity for human refugees. Go north. Find your own kind. I can work. She took a step forward, and the spear point pressed against her chest. I can cook, I can clean, I can tend wounds. Please. I'll do anything. Something flickered in the young wolf's expression. Not sympathy exactly, but calculation. The camp would have need of servants, especially now with an army on the march. Human hands to do the work that warriors shouldn't waste time on. Wait here, he said finally, and disappeared between the tents. Briseina waited, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Her hand drifted to the small pouch at her belt, hidden beneath the folds of her dress. Inside were 3 vials, each no larger than her thumb. The poison had taken her 2 years to perfect, extracted from the bark of the ghost willow that grew only in the highest mountain valleys. Tasteless, odorless, and deadly in even the smallest amounts. The wolves could survive almost any wound, could heal from injuries that would kill a human. But poison was different. Poison spread through the blood, and not even a wolf's supernatural healing could stop it once it took hold. The sentry returned with an older wolf, a grizzled warrior with scars crossing his bare chest. She claims to be a refugee. Says she can work. The scarred wolf looked Briseina up and down with cold yellow eyes. You have family? Dead. All dead. She let her voice crack. Please. I just want to live. You serve in the Bloodsworn's tent, the scarred wolf said. You cook, you clean, you keep your mouth shut. You try to run, you try to steal, you even look at a warrior wrong, and I'll gut you myself. Understood? Briseina bowed her head, hiding the fierce satisfaction that burned through her. The Bloodsworn's tent. She couldn't have asked for better placement. Yes, sir. Thank you. They took her deeper into the camp. Everywhere she looked, wolves prowled and trained and sharpened their weapons. She caught snatches of conversation, rough voices discussing the villages they'd burned, the territories they'd claimed. They spoke of humans the way hunters spoke of deer. The Bloodsworn's tent was the largest in the camp aside from the king's own pavilion. It stood in the center of the war camp, marked by 3 banners that snapped in the cold wind. Briseina was pushed through the entrance and immediately hit by the smell of blood, smoke, and unwashed bodies. 3 men sat around a low table, eating breakfast. Found you a servant, the scarred wolf said, shoving Briseina forward. Refugee. Says she can cook. The largest of the 3 men looked up, and Briseina's blood went cold. Griver the Cruel was even bigger than the stories claimed, a mountain of muscle and scarred flesh. The necklace of finger bones clicked against his bare chest as he turned his head. Can she now? His voice was like gravel grinding. Come here, girl. Briseina approached on shaking legs. This was real now. These were the men who had slaughtered thousands. These were the monsters from every nightmare the scattered clans had ever whispered about. And she was going to kill them. What's your name? Tomek the Red asked. He was leaner than Griver, but no less dangerous. His hands were stained rust brown, and his smile showed too many teeth. Mara, Briseina lied. She'd prepared the false name days ago. My name is Mara. The 3rd man, Asander, didn't speak. He simply watched her with eyes like chips of ice. The Silent, they called him. Some said he'd had his tongue cut out in punishment. Others said he simply had nothing worth saying. Either way, he made Briseina's skin crawl. Well, Mara, Griver said, you work for us now. You keep our tent clean, our food cooked, our wine poured. You do good work, you live. You disappoint us. He fingered the bone necklace. I'm always looking for new decorations. I understand, Briseina whispered. They put her to work immediately. She cleaned the tent, scrubbed blood from armor, prepared their meals. The Bloodsworn treated her like furniture, barely acknowledging her presence except to bark orders. Which was perfect. It meant they didn't watch her too closely when she handled their food. The poison needed time to work. She couldn't just dump it in their dinner and hope for the best. Wolves had enhanced senses. They might smell it, might taste something wrong. She needed to be subtle, patient. So she spent 3 days learning their routines. Griver liked his meat nearly raw and drank wine like water. Tomek preferred bread and cheese, always eating while he sharpened his weapons. Asander ate little but drank herbal tea every night before sleep. Tea was perfect. Dark, bitter, fragrant. A substance that would hide the ghost willow's properties. On the 4th night, Brisenna prepared Asander's tea as usual. Her hands were steady as she crushed the dried leaves, as she poured the boiling water, as she let it steep. And when she was certain no one was watching, she opened one of her vials and tipped 3 drops into the cup. Tea ready? Tomek called from across the tent. Yes, sir. Brisenna carried the cup to Asander, setting it beside him on the table. Her heart was thunder in her ears. The silent picked up the cup, raised it to his lips, and drank. Brisenna turned away, busying herself with cleaning to hide her shaking hands. She waited for a cry, a crash, some sign that he knew what she'd done. But there was nothing. Just the normal sounds of the tent, warriors talking and drinking and laughing about the villages they would burn tomorrow. An hour later, Asander retired to his bedroll. 2 hours later, his breathing had slowed. 3 hours later, it stopped entirely. Griver found him at dawn. He's not breathing. Asander, wake up. Brisenna stood in the corner of the tent, forcing confusion onto her face as Tomek rushed to his companion's side. He's dead, Tomek said, his voice filled with disbelief. How is he dead? We're wolves, we don't just die in our sleep. Poison, Griver snarled. He whirled on Brisenna. What did you feed him? Nothing. Just tea, the same tea I always prepare. She was cut off as Griver crossed the tent in 2 massive strides and grabbed her by the throat. You poisoned him. He lifted her off the ground, his fingers crushing her windpipe. You miserable human wretch, I'll rip you apart. Black spots danced in Brisenna's vision. She clawed at his hand, gasping, dying. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She'd planned to poison them over days, to slip away in the confusion. But Griver was going to kill her now, and Tomek would live, and it would all be for nothing. With the last of her strength, Brisenna's hand found her belt. Found the 2nd vial. She ripped it free and smashed it against Griver's face. The poison splashed into his eyes, his nose, his mouth. He roared and dropped her, clawing at his face. Brisenna hit the ground hard, gasping for air, watching as the cruel staggered backward. What did you do? Tomek had his sword out now, advancing on her. What did you do to him? Griver's roar turned into a choking gurgle. He fell to his knees, blood pouring from his nose and mouth. The ghost willow was in his bloodstream now, racing toward his heart. Tomek's eyes went wide with horror and rage. I'm going to kill you so slowly. Brisenna threw the 3rd vial at him. It shattered against his chest, and he looked down in confusion at the liquid soaking through his shirt. Then his expression changed to fear as he understood. No. No. He lunged for her, but his legs buckled. The poison was already working. Brisenna scrambled backward as both warriors collapsed. Griver hit the ground with a crash that shook the tent. Tomek crawled toward her, his sword scraping uselessly against the dirt, his eyes already glazing over. For my people, Brisenna whispered. For every village you burned. Every child you killed. Tomek's hands stretched toward her one last time, then went still. Silence filled the tent. 3 of the most feared warriors in the Wolf Kingdom lay dead. And Brisenna stood over them, covered in blood and poison, her chest heaving. Then she heard the shouts outside. Someone had heard the commotion. Someone was coming. Brisenna ran. She burst from the tent just as wolves began to converge from all directions. She didn't look back, didn't think, just sprinted toward the edge of camp with everything she had. The Bloodsworn are dead. The human killed them. The cry went up like a battle horn. Arrows whistled past her head. Brisenna dodged between tents, her feet barely touching the ground. She could hear them behind her, dozens of them, their howls of rage splitting the dawn. She made it to the tree line. Branches tore at her dress, roots tried to trip her, but she kept running. Deeper into the forest, away from the camp, away from the death she'd left behind. But even as she ran, even as the sounds of pursuit faded behind her, Briseina knew one terrible truth. She'd succeeded in killing the Bloodsworn. She'd struck a blow that would echo across the kingdom. And now the most powerful alpha in the realm would hunt her until one of them was dead. The question was no longer if he would find her. The question was, what would Dacron do to her when he did? Dacron was breaking his fast when they brought him the news. 3 servants carried the bodies into his pavilion, laying them on the ground before his table. Griver, Asander, the Bloodsworn, his brothers in all but blood, the warriors who had fought beside him for 20 years. The Alpha King rose slowly from his chair. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered and powerful, with eyes the color of amber and hair like winter frost. Scars crisscrossed his bare arms, each one a memory of battles won. But the expression on his face now was something his warriors had rarely seen. Pure, incandescent rage. "Tell me," Dacron said quietly, "how this happened." The scarred wolf who'd brought Briseina to camp stood with his head bowed. "A refugee, my king. She claimed to be fleeing the burned villages. She asked to work as a servant. We placed her in the Bloodsworn's tent. She poisoned them. One human woman." Dacron walked around the bodies, studying each face. "One unarmed refugee walked into my war camp, killed my 3 best warriors and escaped. Is that what you're telling me?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Dacron knelt beside Griver's body. Even in death, the Cruel looked fierce, his face frozen in a snarl of pain and rage. Dacron reached out and closed his friend's eyes, then did the same for Tomek and Asander. "We tracked her to the forest edge, my king," another wolf spoke up. "But she disappeared into the deep woods. We have hunting parties out now, following her scent." "What was her name?" Dacron's voice was still quiet, but something in it made every wolf in the pavilion tense. "She called herself Mara, my king." But that was likely false. The refugees from Kelmar described a woman who'd been asking questions about the Bloodsworn. Her real name is Briseina. She's from a village called the Myra. Dacron stood. "The Myra? That's the settlement 3 days north." "Yes, my king. We were planning to take it after we secured the valley territories." Change of plans. The Alpha King turned to face his assembled warriors. "We march on the Myra immediately. Gather the army. I want that village surrounded by nightfall." "My king, with respect, one village of farmers hardly requires the full army." "Did I ask for your opinion?" Dacron's eyes flashed gold, and the wolf who'd spoken immediately dropped to his knees. "This woman killed the Bloodsworn. She struck at the heart of my command, humiliated me before my own warriors, and disappeared like smoke. That requires a response." He walked to the entrance of the pavilion, looking out over his vast camp. "I want Briseina found. I want her village scoured. Question every human, check every cellar, burn every building if you have to. And if she's not there..." He paused, his jaw tight. "Then someone in that village knows where she went. Use whatever methods necessary to make them talk." "And when we find her, my king?" the scarred wolf asked carefully. Dacron was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hard as stone. "When you find her, you bring her to me alive. I don't care if she's fought you every step of the way. I don't care if she's poisoned half my army. You bring her to me breathing, conscious, and able to speak. Because before I'm done with her, I want her to understand exactly what her little act of vengeance has cost her people." The wolves dispersed to carry out his orders. Within the hour, the war camp was moving. Thousands of warriors marching north toward a village that had no idea what was coming. Dacron stood in his tent, alone with the bodies of his fallen brothers. He'd known them since they were young wolves barely old enough to shift. They'd fought together through the clan wars, through the Great Hunger, through every challenge that had threatened to tear the kingdom apart. And now they were gone. Killed by a human woman with poison and cunning. I'll find her, Dacron said softly to the dead. I'll find her, and I'll make her wish she'd never been born. This I swear on your memory, on my honor as Alpha, on every drop of blood in my veins. Bri-Sena of the Myra will know what it means to strike at the Wolf King. He placed his hand on each warrior's chest, speaking the old words that would send their spirits to the ancestors. Then he walked from the tent and didn't look back. The march north was swift and brutal. Dacron pushed his forces hard, allowing no rest, no delays. They covered in 2 days what should have taken 4. And when they crested the final ridge and saw the Myra spread out in the valley below, the Alpha King raised his hand to halt the army. "Surround it," he ordered. "No one gets in or out. If anyone tries to run, bring them down. I want this village sealed tighter than a tomb." The wolves moved like a living net, flowing around Themra's perimeter. The villagers had some warning at least. Bri-Sena watched from her hiding place in the hills as Themra's walls were reinforced, as their pathetic militia gathered with their farming tools turned weapons. She'd made it back 2 days ago, slipping through the forest like a ghost, her hands still shaking from what she'd done. Orlen had wept when she told him of her success, then wept again when he realized what it meant. "You should have kept running," the old man had said. "You should have disappeared into the north. And let them burn the Myra thinking I was here?" Bri-Sena shook her head. "No. I needed to warn you all. To give you time to prepare." But prepare for what? An army of thousands? The wrath of an Alpha King? Now, watching the wolves encircle her village, Bri-Sena felt the full weight of what she'd done. She'd wanted to save her people. Instead, she might have doomed them. Dacron rode to the front of his army on a massive gray warhorse. Even from a distance, Bri-Sena could feel the power radiating from him. This was the Wolf King, the Alpha of Alphas, the warrior who'd unified the clans through blood and iron. And she'd killed his best friends. "Villagers of the Myra." Dacron's voice carried across the valley like thunder. "You harbor a murderer in your midst. A woman named Bri-Sena who poisoned 3 of my warriors under a flag of false surrender. Surrender her to me now, and your village will be spared. Refuse, and I will reduce your homes to ash and scatter your bones across these mountains. You have until sunset to decide." Silence fell over the valley. Bri-Sena could see movement on Themra's walls as villagers argued among themselves. She knew what they were thinking. Why should they all die for one woman's actions? Why should their children burn because Bri-Sena had played hero? She couldn't let that happen. Bri-Sena stood from her hiding place, her decision made. She would walk down there right now, would give herself to Dacron, would face whatever torture he had planned. At least her people would live. But before she could take a single step, a voice rang out from Themra's walls. "We don't know where she is." It was Orlen, standing on the ramparts with his arms spread wide. "Bri-Sena came back long enough to warn us you were coming, then disappeared into the deep mountains. She's gone and we don't know where." It was a lie. A beautiful, terrible lie to protect her. Dacron sat perfectly still on his horse. Then he turned his head, scanning the hills around the valley. Bri-Sena ducked down, her heart hammering. Could he see her? Smell her? "You're lying," the Alpha King called back. "I can taste the deception on the wind. She's close. Probably watching right now." He dismounted, walking forward until he stood just outside arrow range of the village walls. "Bri-Sena." His voice echoed off the mountains. "I know you can hear me. Your people are lying to protect you, and it's going to get them all killed. Is that what you want? To watch this village burn knowing you could have stopped it?" Bri-Sena's hands clenched into fists. He was right. She couldn't hide here while innocents died for her actions. "I'll make you a deal." Dacron continued. "You have 1 hour. Walk out of whatever hole you're hiding in, present yourself to me, and I'll spare this village. Your people can live, can rebuild, can forget you ever existed. All you have to do is surrender. 1 life for hundreds. Seems like a fair trade, doesn't it? Don't do it." Orlen shouted from the walls. "Bri-Sena, if you're listening, don't you dare. We knew what this would cost. We accepted it." "Did the children accept it?" Dacron asked coldly. Did the mothers with babes in arms accept death because one woman wanted to play assassin? Brisena stood again, ready to walk down there and end this. But a hand grabbed her ankle, yanking her back down behind the rocks. Don't. A young woman had crawled up beside her. Rihanna, one of the village scouts. Don't give him what he wants. People will die, Brisena started. People will die anyway. Rihanna's face was hard. You think he'll really spare the village? He's an alpha king. His pride won't allow anyone who defied him to live. The moment he has you, he'll burn the Myra anyway. At least this way, he doesn't get both. Brisena stared at her. You can't know that. I know wolves. Rihanna spat the word like a curse. They're all liars and killers. Every last one. Down in the valley, Dacron was still waiting. 1 hour, he'd said. The sun crept across the sky, marking time until sunset. Brisena watched, torn between guilt and survival, as her village prepared to die for her sins. What would you choose? Your own life, or the lives of everyone you've ever known? The hour passed in agonizing silence. Brisena watched from the hills as the sun sank lower, painting the valley in shades of blood and gold. Down below, the villagers of the Myra had made their choice. They stood on their walls with whatever weapons they could find, farmers and craftsmen ready to die rather than surrender one of their own. It made her sick with pride and horror. When the last rays of sunlight touched the mountain peaks, Dacron raised his hand. Your time is up. The woman is not coming. So be it. He turned to his army. Take the village. Kill anyone who resists. Burn it to the foundations. No. Brisena lunged forward, but Rihanna tackled her, dragging her back behind the rocks. There are children down there. Brisena struggled against the other woman's grip. Babies. I can't let them. If you go down there now, you die and they still burn. Rihanna hissed in her ear. Use your head. This isn't over. The wolf army surged forward like a dark tide. Arrows flew from Femra's walls, and a few wolves fell, but it was like trying to stop an ocean with a handful of stones. The wolves hit the village gates with a crash that shook the earth. But the gates didn't break. Dacron frowned. His warriors were the strongest in the realm. Those wooden gates should have splintered like kindling. Instead, they held firm. Magic, one of his commanders said with disgust. The humans have warded the gates. Indeed they had. Brisena could see the glowing symbols carved into the wood, ancient protective runes that the scattered clans had used for generations. They wouldn't hold forever, but they'd buy time. Then we go over. Dacron pointed to the walls. Scale them. I want that village taken before full dark. Wolves began to climb, their inhuman strength allowing them to scramble up the wooden palisades like spiders. But the defenders were ready. Boiling oil poured down, and the air filled with screams as wolves fell burning to the ground. More took their place. Always more. Brisena watched Orlen on the walls, the old man wielding a spear with shaking hands as he jabbed at wolves trying to crest the ramparts. She saw Haldwin the blacksmith swing his hammer into a wolf skull. She saw young Jarek, barely 16, fighting with a courage he shouldn't have needed. We have to help them, Brisena said desperately. How? Rihanna's voice was bitter. There's 2 of us and thousands of them. But watching her people die while she hid in the hills was more than Brisena could bear. She'd started this war. She'd killed the Bloodsworn. And now she'd finish it, one way or another. The forest, Brisena said suddenly. The deep forest to the east. There are paths there, old hunters' trails. If we could get the villagers out through those paths while the wolves are focused on the walls. The wolves have the village surrounded, Rihanna pointed out. The eastern side is the weakest. Most of Dacron's forces are concentrated on the main gates. Brisena's mind raced. If we could create a distraction, draw them away from the east. What kind of distraction? Brisena met her eyes. The kind that gets their king's attention. Before Rihanna could stop her, Brisena stood and cupped her hands around her mouth. Dacron, I'm here. You want me? Come and get me. Her voice echoed across the valley. For a moment, nothing changed. The battle raged on, wolves and humans dying on the walls. Then Dacron turned. His amber eyes locked on the hillside where Briseina stood, and even from this distance, she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. "There," he said quietly to his commanders. "That's her." Half his army peeled away from the village, streaming up the hillside toward Briseina's position. Hundreds of wolves, all focused on her. "Run!" Rihanna grabbed Briseina's hand and they bolted into the forest. Behind them, the wolves gave chase. Their howls split the night, a sound that turned Briseina's blood to ice. She'd heard those howls before, when they'd hunted her people for sport. But now they were hunting her specifically, and the sound was filled with such rage and hunger that it barely sounded animal at all. The forest was thick here, old-growth trees with roots that snarled the ground. Briseina knew these woods. She'd played in them as a child, had learned every path and stream. But the wolves were faster, tireless, and they could see in the dark far better than any human. A wolf burst from the shadows to her left. Briseina dove under its lunge, rolling to her feet and sprinting in a new direction. Rihanna was somewhere behind her, the sound of snapping branches marking her flight. More wolves. They were everywhere, cutting off escape routes, herding her deeper into the forest. Briseina's lungs burned, her legs screaming for rest. She couldn't keep this up much longer. She broke into a small clearing and skidded to a halt. Wolves surrounded her on all sides, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. 20 of them at least, all in their animal forms, massive beasts with fangs like daggers. Slowly they began to close in. Briseina pulled a knife from her belt. It was pathetically small compared to the creatures stalking toward her, but it was all she had. If she was going to die here, she'd take at least one of them with her. "Stop!" The command came from the edge of the clearing, and every wolf froze. Dacron stepped into view. He was in human form but no less intimidating for it. Power rolled off him in waves, and Briseina understood in that moment why he was king. It wasn't just strength. It was something deeper, something that made even other wolves bow their heads in his presence. "Back away," Dacron told his warriors. They obeyed immediately, melting into the shadows. The Alpha King walked toward Briseina slowly, like a hunter approaching a cornered animal. Which, she supposed, was exactly what this was. "Briseina of the Myra," he said. "The woman who killed my bloodsworn. I have to admit, you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" She kept the knife between them, though they both knew it was useless. "Someone bigger." He stopped just outside her reach, studying her with those unsettling amber eyes. "Someone more warrior-like. You look like a farmer's daughter." "I am a farmer's daughter." Briseina's voice was steady despite her terror. "I'm also the woman who poisoned your best warriors while they slept. So maybe appearances don't matter much." Something that might have been respect flickered across Dacron's face. "You have courage. Stupid, suicidal courage, but courage nonetheless. Most humans can't even meet my eyes. But you stand here with a little knife like you actually think you can fight me. I killed 3 of your warriors." "You poisoned 3 of my warriors," he corrected. "There's a difference. Poison is a coward's weapon," says the man who brought an army to crush one village. Briseina's fear was giving way to anger now. She was going to die anyway. Might as well speak the truth. "You want to talk about courage? Where's the courage in burning farmers' homes? In killing children? The bloodsworn were butchers, and I did the world a favor." Dacron moved so fast she didn't see it. One moment he was 5 feet away, the next his hand was around her throat, lifting her off the ground. The knife fell from her hand. "A favor." His voice was deadly quiet. "Griver saved my life in the clan wars. Tomek was the first wolf who swore loyalty to me when I challenged for Alpha. Asander was my sword master, the one who taught me to fight. They weren't just my warriors. They were my brothers. And you killed them like dogs." Black spots danced in Briseina's vision as his grip tightened. This was it. She was going to die in this forest clearing, and no one would ever know what happened to her. But then Dacron's grip loosened slightly. Not enough to let her breathe properly, but enough that she wasn't passing out. "No," he said, more to himself than her. "You don't get the mercy of a quick death. I made a promise to their memory. You're going to suffer for what you did. You're going to beg for death before I'm through with you." He lowered her to the ground but didn't release her throat. "Take her," he said to the wolves waiting in the shadows. "Chain her. I want her conscious and unharmed for the journey back to the capital. She'll face justice there, in front of the entire kingdom." Rough hands grabbed Brisenna's arms. Iron shackles closed around her wrists with a click that sounded like a tomb ceiling. She was dragged toward the edge of the clearing, her feet barely touching the ground. "Wait!" She forced the word out through her bruised throat. "The village. You said you'd spare them if I surrendered." Dacron turned back to look at her. "You didn't surrender. You ran. You made me chase you through the forest like a rabbit. The deal is void." "No. Please. They're innocent. They harbored you. They lied to protect you. That makes them accomplices." He started to walk away. "I'll do anything." Brisenna screamed the words. "Anything you want. Just please don't hurt them." The Alpha King paused. For a long moment he stood with his back to her, perfectly still. Then he turned around slowly. "Anything?" he asked softly. Brisenna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Anything. Kill me, torture me, I don't care. Just let them live." Dacron studied her for a long time. Something shifted in his expression, though Brisenna couldn't read what it meant. "Very well," he said finally. "I'll spare your village. On one condition." "Name it." "You belong to me now. Completely. Your life, your will, your choices, all of it. You do exactly what I say when I say it, without question or hesitation. You become my property in every sense of the word. And if you ever try to escape, if you ever disobey me, if you ever give me cause to doubt your submission." He leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "I'll come back here and I'll slaughter every man, woman, and child in the Myra while you watch. Do you understand?" It was slavery. Worse than slavery. He was asking her to give up everything that made her human, to become a thing he owned. But the alternative was watching her people burn. "I understand," Brisenna whispered. "Say it," Dacron commanded. "Say the words." She met his eyes, forcing herself not to look away. "I belong to you. My life, my will, my choices. I am yours completely, and I will never try to escape." Something dark and satisfied crossed the Alpha King's face. "Good girl." He turned to one of his commanders. "Send word to the troops at the Myra. The assault is over. The villagers are to be left unharmed. This woman has paid for their protection with her freedom." The wolf ran off to deliver the message. Brisenna sagged in her chains, relief and horror warring inside her. She'd saved them. Her people would live. But what had she condemned herself to? Dacron walked back to her, reaching out to tilt her chin up with one finger. "You made a clever move tonight, calling out to draw my forces away from the eastern side of the village. I assume your friends used the distraction to evacuate through the forest paths." Brisenna's eyes widened. He'd known. He'd known what she was doing and let it happen. "I could have stopped them," Dacron continued. "Could have sent wolves to cut them off. But I wanted to see what you'd do. Wanted to know if you were the type to sacrifice yourself for others, or if you'd keep running to save your own skin." "Does it matter?" Brisenna asked bitterly. "Yes." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she flinched. "It tells me what kind of captive you'll make. Someone who fights for others is much more interesting than someone who only fights for themselves. You can break someone fighting for others. Make them hurt the thing they're trying to protect. It's delicious." The casual cruelty of his words made Brisenna's stomach turn. This was the man who would own her now. This was what she'd sold herself to. They dragged her back through the forest toward the wolf camp. Behind them, Themra's walls still stood, and smoke rose from cooking fires instead of burning homes. Her people were safe. And Brisenna had become the slave of the man she tried to destroy. The wolf camp was a different place in victory. Warriors celebrated, drinking and fighting and howling at the moon. They parted as Dacron walked through with his prize, and Brisenna felt their eyes on her. Hungry, hateful, curious. "Put her in my tent," Dacron ordered. "Post guards. No one touches her, no one speaks to her. She's mine alone." They threw her into the king's pavilion and chained her wrist to a post driven deep into the ground. The chain was long enough to let her sit or lie down, but not long enough to reach the tent's entrance. Bri-Senna collapsed onto the furs that covered the ground, her body finally giving out. She'd been running on fear and adrenaline for so long that now, in this moment of stillness, everything caught up with her at once. She'd killed the Bloodsworn. She'd saved her village. And she'd damned herself to a fate she couldn't begin to imagine. Outside the tent, she could hear the celebration continuing. Wolves laughing, singing battle songs, recounting their victories. They sounded so human in those moments. It was easy to forget they were predators. The tent flap opened and Dacron entered. He'd stripped off his battle armor and wore only simple trousers, his chest bare and marked with dozens of scars. He moved with the casual grace of someone completely comfortable in their own power. Bri-Senna pressed herself against the post, as far from him as the chain would allow. "Relax," Dacron said, pouring himself wine from a silver pitcher. "I'm not going to touch you tonight. You look half dead already, and where's the fun in that?" He settled into a chair, studying her over the rim of his cup. "Tell me something, Bri-Senna. When you poisoned my warriors, did you know what it would cost you? Did you understand that you were starting a war you couldn't win?" "I knew." Her voice was hoarse. "I knew exactly what it would cost. And you did it anyway. But revenge? Glory? Some misguided sense of heroism? Survival?" Bri-Senna pulled her knees to her chest. "Your armies were burning everything in their path. My people were going to die whether I acted or not. At least this way, I gave them a chance. By killing 3 wolves, you think you saved your people?" Dacron laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're more naive than I thought. The Bloodsworn were my friends, yes, but they were also my restraint. They tempered my anger, reminded me when to show mercy. Now they're gone, and there's nothing holding me back." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the lamplight. "So congratulations, Bri-Senna. In trying to save your people, you may have doomed them all. Because without my Bloodsworn to counsel mercy, every village that defies me will burn. Every human who raises a hand against my rule will die. And it will be your fault." The words hit her like physical blows. Could he be right? Had she made everything worse? "I can see the doubt in your eyes," Dacron said softly. "Good. Let it eat at you. Let it keep you awake at night. Because you're going to spend a very long time thinking about what you've done. And when I finally decide what to do with you." He smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "But I promise it will be memorable." He stood and walked to the entrance of the tent. "Get some sleep, little assassin. Tomorrow we begin the journey to the capital. You'll meet the rest of my court, see the kingdom you tried to strike at, and then we'll decide together what your life is worth." He left her alone in the darkness, chained and broken and wondering if death might have been kinder after all. But somewhere in the depths of her despair, a small flame still burned. She'd killed 3 of the most feared warriors in the kingdom. She'd looked the Alpha King in the eyes and not backed down. She'd traded her freedom for her people's lives and never hesitated. Dacron thought he'd broken her. Thought he'd turned her into a slave. But Bri-Senna had survived this long by being underestimated. And if she could just stay alive, stay alert, stay strong, maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to survive this too. What price would you pay for freedom? And how far would you go to reclaim it? The journey to the capital took 7 days. 7 days of being dragged behind Dacron's warhorse like a trophy, her wrists rubbed raw from the iron shackles. 7 days of watching the landscape change from the familiar mountains of her homeland to the sprawling forests and then the great plains where the Wolf Kingdom had built its seat of power. And 7 days of Dacron's mind games. He didn't torture her, didn't starve her or beat her. Instead, he talked. Every night when they made camp, he'd have her brought to his tent and he'd speak to her for hours. About the kingdom. About his wars. About the Bloodsworn and their shared history. Griver wasn't always cruel, Dacron said on the 3rd night. They sat across from each other in his tent, Bri-Senna chained as always, the Alpha King drinking wine. When I first met him, he was a young wolf with too much honor for his own good. He believed in codes, in fair fights, in treating enemies with respect. He swirled his wine. The clan wars beat that out of him. Wolves who fought with honor died. Wolves who showed mercy were slaughtered. So Griver adapted. He became what he needed to be to survive. And yes, he became cruel. But it wasn't who he was born to be. It was what the world made him. Briseina said nothing. She'd learned that responding only encouraged him to talk more. You killed him thinking you were slaying a monster, Dacron continued. And maybe you were right. Maybe he had become a monster. But monsters are made, Briseina. Remember that. On the 5th night he talked about Tomek. The Red was a berserker in battle. Once the bloodlust took him, he couldn't stop. Couldn't even distinguish friend from foe sometimes. It was a curse as much as a gift. After major battles, I'd find him weeping in his tent, surrounded by the bodies of wolves he'd killed by accident. So I did him a favor, Briseina said before she could stop herself. Ended his suffering. Dacron's hand moved so fast it was a blur. He grabbed her face, his fingers digging into her cheeks. Don't you dare try to justify what you did. Tomek's curse was his to bear, not yours to end. You're a murderer, and pretending otherwise won't change that. He released her, leaving red marks on her skin. But yes, in a way, you did end his suffering. And I hate you for it. The honesty of that admission surprised them both. By the 7th day, they crested a ridge and Briseina saw the capital spread out before them. The City of Wolves. It was massive, far larger than any human settlement she'd ever seen. Stone buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high, connected by bridges and walkways. The streets teemed with wolves in both forms, thousands upon thousands of them, more predators in one place than Briseina had imagined could exist. And at the city's heart stood the palace. A fortress of black stone that climbed the hillside like a scar against the sky. Banners flew from its towers, crimson and gold, snapping in the wind. Welcome to your new home, Dacron said. He'd ridden back to speak to her, his warhorse walking alongside the guards who led her on foot. Vargoth has stood for 300 years. My ancestors built it with blood and stone, and I've spent my reign making it the greatest city in the realm. What do you think? Briseina wanted to say she thought it was a monument to violence and conquest. That every stone was probably laid by slaves, that the wealth came from plundering human villages. But she'd learned that honesty with Dacron was dangerous. It's impressive, she said carefully. Liar. But he smiled. You think it's a den of monsters. You're wondering how many humans died to build those walls. The answer is none, actually. We built Vargoth ourselves with our own hands. Unlike humans, we don't need slaves to accomplish great things. The barbs stung, but Briseina kept her face blank. They entered the city through the main gates. People stopped to stare as the Alpha King rode past with his prisoner. Briseina heard the whispers, saw the pointing fingers. Word had spread ahead of them. Everyone knew who she was and what she'd done. Some of the looks were hateful. Others were curious. A few, strangely, held something that might have been respect. The palace gates opened as they approached, and Dacron led them into a vast courtyard. Dozens of wolves waited there, all of them richly dressed, all of them radiating power. The court. Dacron dismounted and gestured for Briseina to be brought forward. The guards dragged her to the center of the courtyard and forced her to her knees. Lords and ladies of Vargoth, Dacron's voice rang out. I present to you Briseina of the Myra, the woman who murdered the Bloodsworn. A ripple of anger ran through the assembled wolves. Someone spit at her feet. She came to our camp disguised as a refugee, Dacron continued. She earned our trust, served my warriors, and then poisoned them in cold blood. 3 of the greatest wolves who ever lived, dead because we showed mercy to a human. More angry mutters. Briseina could feel the hatred like heat against her skin. Some of you have called for her immediate execution, Dacron said. And I understand that sentiment. What she did demands blood, demands vengeance. He walked a slow circle around her. But I've decided on a different path. Briseina has agreed to surrender herself completely to my will. She's pledged her life, her freedom, her very soul to me in exchange for her village's safety. And I have accepted this bargain. One of the court members stepped forward, A tall woman with silver hair and cold gray eyes. My king, with respect, why would you accept such a bargain? Kill her and be done with it. Send a message to every human in the realm about what happens when they strike at wolves. Oh, I intend to send a message, Velsia. Dacron stopped in front of Briseina, forcing her to look up at him. But not the one you're thinking. This woman killed 3 of my best warriors through cunning and poison. She humiliated me, defied me, and escaped my army. And now she belongs to me absolutely. What better message could I send? That even our enemies, even those who wound us most deeply, cannot escape our reach. We don't just kill our foes. We break them. He reached down and grabbed Briseina's chin, tilting her face toward the assembled court. Look at her. Remember her face. Because in the months and years to come, you'll watch her transformation. You'll see how completely I can remake a person, how thoroughly I can strip away everything that made them defiant. And when I'm done, she'll be the perfect example of what happens to those who dare strike at the Wolf King. The court members nodded, satisfied with this explanation. But Briseina saw something else in a few faces. Pity. Disgust. One young wolf in the back looked away entirely, as if he couldn't bear to watch. Take her to the lower cells, Dacron ordered. I want her secure until I decide what to do with her. The guards hauled Briseina to her feet and dragged her toward the palace. As they pulled her through the crowd, she heard someone mutter, the blood-sworn deserved what they got. They were butchers. Dacron's head snapped around. Who said that? Silence. No one moved. I asked a question. The Alpha King's voice was deadly quiet. Oh, that. A young male wolf stepped forward, his jaw set. I did, my king. And I stand by it. Griver, Tomek, and Asander committed atrocities in your name. They burned villages of innocents. He never got to finish. Dacron crossed the courtyard in 3 strides and backhanded the young wolf so hard he crashed into the wall. The blood-sworn followed my orders, Dacron said coldly. Every village they burned, I commanded. Every human they killed, I authorized. So if you have a problem with their actions, you have a problem with me. Do you have a problem with me, Jesric? The young wolf wiped blood from his mouth. No, my king. Then keep your opinions to yourself. Or I'll cut out your tongue and feed it to the crows. Dacron turned back to the guards. Get her out of my sight. They took Briseina deep into the palace, down spiral staircases that seemed to descend forever. The air grew colder, damper. The walls dripped with moisture and something that might have been old blood. Finally, they reached the cells. Iron bars set into stone, barely large enough to lie down in. They threw Briseina into one and slammed the door shut with a clang that echoed through the dungeon. Water once a day, one guard said to the other. Food if the king remembers to order it. Otherwise, she starves. They left her in darkness. Briseina sat on the cold stone floor, her chains dragging at her wrists. She could hear other prisoners in nearby cells. Sobbing. Cursing. One person was singing a song in a language she didn't recognize. This was her life now. A cell in the dark, at the mercy of a king who hated her. But she was still alive. Still breathing. Still thinking. And as long as she could think, she could plan. Dacron wanted to break her. Wanted to make her an example. But he'd made a mistake keeping her alive. Because every day she lived was another day she could learn about this place, about his weaknesses, about how to hurt him. She'd killed the blood-sworn with poison and patience. Maybe she could kill a king the same way. Or maybe she'd die trying. Either way, she wasn't going to make it easy for him. Footsteps echoed in the corridor hours later. Briseina looked up as someone approached her cell, carrying a lamp that pushed back the darkness. It was the young wolf from the courtyard. Jesric. His lip was still split from where Dacron had hit him. What do you want? Briseina asked hoarsely. To talk. He glanced over his shoulder, checking that they were alone. You killed the blood-sworn. That makes you either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Both, probably. He smiled slightly at that. My mother was from a village called Rothina. 3 years ago, the blood-sworn burned it during a raid. She died in the flames along with my 2 younger siblings. I was away, training with the king's guard. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but ash. Brisena stared at him. You're a wolf. Why would they burn your... My mother was human, Jesric said quietly. My father was a wolf who fell in love with a human woman. It's rare, but it happens. Their children are always wolves, but the human parent. He shook his head. The Bloodsworn didn't care about the details. They saw a human village and they burned it. My mother, my siblings, all of them gone. I'm sorry, Brisena said and meant it. Don't be sorry. Just know that not all wolves worship Dacron. Not all of us think his wars are just. Some of us are trapped in this system as much as you are. Jesric stepped closer to the bars. I can't free you. If I tried, he'd kill me and everyone I care about. But I can help you survive this. I can make sure you get food, water, maybe even information about what's happening in the palace. Why would you risk that? Because watching Dacron torture you to death won't bring my family back. But maybe helping you survive will mean something. Maybe it will prove that not every wolf is a monster. Brisena studied him, trying to decide if this was a trick. Some elaborate game Dacron was playing to give her hope before crushing it. But the pain in Jesric's eyes looked real. What do you want in return? She asked. Nothing. Just, if you ever get the chance to hurt Dacron, to really hurt him, don't hesitate. Promise me that. Brisena thought about the Alpha King, about his casual cruelty, about the way he'd talked about breaking her. I promise, she said. Jesric nodded and turned to leave. But at the entrance to the corridor, he paused. For what it's worth, I think you were right to kill them. The Bloodsworn were monsters. And if there's any justice in this world, Dacron will answer for the things he's done too. Then he was gone, and Brisena was alone in the dark again. But she wasn't quite as hopeless as before. She had an ally in the palace. Someone who hated Dacron as much as she did. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in a place like this, something was everything. How long could she survive in the wolf's den? And what would she become in the process? 3 weeks passed in the cell. 3 weeks of darkness, cold, and uncertainty. True to his word, Jesric ensured she received food and water regularly, always coming himself to deliver it when he could slip away unnoticed. The court is divided, he told her one night, speaking in hushed tones through the cell bars. Half of them think Dacron should execute you publicly. The other half thinks keeping you alive is a sign of weakness. Either way, they're watching him closely. And what does he think? Brisena asked. She'd lost weight in the cell, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, but her eyes were still sharp. He hasn't decided yet. Or if he has, he's not sharing it with anyone. Jesric slid a piece of bread through the bars. But he's been asking questions about you. About your village, your family, what you care about. It's like he's trying to figure out the best way to hurt you. Brisena took the bread, her hands shaking slightly. He wants to know what I love so he can destroy it. Probably, Jesric said grimly. That's how Dacron operates. He doesn't just kill his enemies. He dismantles them piece by piece until there's nothing left. Your father, Brisena said suddenly. The wolf who loved your mother. Is he still alive? Pain flickered across Jesric's face. No. He challenged Dacron after my mother died. Said the king had gone too far, that burning human villages was cowardice. Dacron killed him in single combat in front of the entire court. I'm sorry. So am I. Jesric stood to leave. I have to go. My patrol shift starts soon. But Brisena, be ready. Something's coming. I can feel it. He was right. The next day, guards came for her. They hauled her from the cell, blinking against the torchlight after so long in darkness. They dragged her up through the palace, but not to the throne room. Instead, they took her to a bathing chamber. Clean yourself, one guard ordered, pointing to a stone tub filled with steaming water. The king wants you presentable. Brisena was too tired to question it. She stripped off her filthy clothes and sank into the hot water, scrubbing away weeks of grime. When she emerged, she found clean clothes waiting. Not servant's rags, but a dress of deep green wool, finely made and surprisingly beautiful. They styled her hair, even gave her food to eat. Real food, not prison rations. Then they took her to Dacron. He was waiting in a private chamber, not the formal throne room. The space was surprisingly intimate, with comfortable chairs, a fireplace, and windows that looked out over the city. Dacron stood by one window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Leave us," he told the guards. They obeyed, closing the door behind them. Briseina was alone with the Alpha King for the first time since her arrival. "Sit," Dacron said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. Briseina remained standing. "I prefer to stand." It wasn't a request. His eyes flashed gold. She sat. Dacron turned from the window, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "You've lost weight. The cell doesn't agree with you. Should I thank you for noticing? You should remember that your continued survival is entirely dependent on my whim." He poured 2 glasses of wine, offering her one. Briseina didn't take it. "If it's poisoned, you might as well just kill me now. If it's not, I don't want anything from you." "Not poisoned." Dacron set the glass on the table beside her. "Just wine. Good wine, actually. From the southern vineyards. I thought you might appreciate something other than water after 3 weeks in that cell." "What do you want, Dacron?" He settled into the chair across from her, cradling his own wine glass. "I've been thinking about you. About what to do with you. The court expects me to execute you, and I'll admit the idea has appeal. Quick, public, sends the right message. So do it. But I made a bargain with you. Your life in exchange for your village's safety. I'm many things, but I'm not an oathbreaker." He sipped his wine. "So I find myself in an unusual position. I have a prisoner I can't kill, don't want to free, and can't figure out how to properly punish. It's annoying." Briseina said nothing, watching him carefully. "I had you brought here because I realized something," Dacron continued. "Keeping you in a cell isn't punishment for someone like you. You're too stubborn, too determined to survive. You just sit down there in the dark, plotting your revenge, waiting for an opportunity. The cell doesn't break you. It just gives you time to think." He leaned forward. "So I've decided to try something different. Something that I think will be much more effective." "What's that?" "Freedom." Briseina blinked. "What?" "I'm going to give you freedom. Relative freedom, anyway. You'll live in the palace, not the cells. You'll eat regular meals, have decent clothes, walk in the gardens if you want. You'll be treated as my guest. No chains, no guards following you every moment. Just a woman living in the palace." "I don't understand." "I know you don't. But you will." Dacron stood and walked to the window again. "See, the thing about freedom is that it's a burden. When you're chained in a cell, your world is simple. Survive each day. That's it. But when you have freedom, you have choices. And choices lead to consequences." He turned back to face her. "You'll have the freedom to walk these halls, to speak with my court members, to observe my kingdom. And every day, you'll have to decide. Do I stay quiet and safe, or do I try something? Do I attempt to escape, to sabotage, to kill? And every day you make that choice, you'll know that one wrong move will mean death for your village." Briseina's blood went cold. "You're making me responsible for their safety." "Exactly. As long as you behave, as long as you play by my rules, the Myra stays untouched. But the moment you step out of line..." He smiled. "Well, you understand the consequences." It was brilliant and cruel. Dacron was turning her freedom into a prison far more effective than any cell. Because now she wouldn't just be fighting to save herself. She'd be fighting to save everyone she loved with every choice she made. "I hate you," Briseina said quietly. "I know. And I'm counting on it. Hatred makes you predictable. Makes you vulnerable." Dacron moved to the door, opening it. "Your room is on the 3rd floor, east wing. Jesric will show you the way. Dinner is at sunset. You'll eat with the court from now on." "Wait." Briseina stood up. "Why Jesric specifically?" Dacron paused in the doorway. "Because I know he's been sneaking food to you in the cells. Did you think I didn't notice? I notice everything in this palace, Briseina. Every whisper, every secret, every act of defiance." Her heart sank. If Dacron knew about Jesric helping her? Relax. The Alpha King said, reading her expression. I'm not going to punish him. The boy lost his family to my bloodsworn. I understand why he'd feel sympathy for you. As long as his actions don't cross certain lines, I'll allow it. He smiled coldly. Besides, having him close to you serves my purposes. He'll report your movements, your conversations. Very helpful. He left her standing there, the door open, freedom and captivity blurring together until she couldn't tell the difference anymore. Jesric arrived minutes later. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes held an apology. He'd been trying to help, and instead he'd become another tool in Dacron's game. I'll show you to your room, he said quietly. They walked through the palace in silence. Bricenna noticed everything, the guards at regular intervals, the servants who stopped and stared, the elaborate artwork on the walls depicting wolves in glory. It was a monument to predatory power. Her room was surprisingly comfortable. A real bed, a window with a view of the mountains, even a small bookshelf. It was more than she'd ever had in the Myra. That just made it worse. I'm sorry, Jesric said once they were alone. I didn't know he was watching. I should have been more careful. It's not your fault. Dacron sees everything. Bricenna sat on the edge of the bed, testing its softness. After weeks on cold stone, it felt wrong. Too comfortable. He wants me to have this. The comfort, the freedom. Because it makes the cage invisible. What will you do? Jesric asked. Survive. What else can I do? She looked up at him. He's right about one thing. Every choice I make now affects the Myra. I can't be reckless anymore. That doesn't mean you have to give up. Doesn't it? Bricenna's voice was bitter. He's thought of everything. If I try to escape, my people die. If I try to kill him, my people die. If I so much as insult him at dinner, my people die. What options does that leave me? Jesric was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. There's a difference between giving up and being patient. Dacron expects you to either break or lash out. Maybe the smart thing is to do neither. Play his game. Learn his patterns. Wait for an opportunity he doesn't see coming. That could take years. So, you're alive. Your village is alive. Sometimes survival is enough. He moved toward the door. Dinner is in 2 hours. Someone will come to escort you. Try to eat something, and try not to antagonize the court too much on your first night. After he left, Bricenna stood and went to the window. From here, she could see all of Vargoth spread out below. Thousands of wolves living their lives, unaware or uncaring that a human prisoner now walked among them. She thought about Jesric's words. Patience. Strategy. Playing the long game. It went against every instinct she had. But maybe that was exactly why it might work. Dacron expected her to be the same woman who'd poisoned his warriors in a desperate gambit. Maybe it was time to become someone else. Someone quieter. Someone who watched and waited and learned. Someone dangerous in an entirely different way. 2 hours later, a servant arrived to escort her to dinner. The great hall was enormous, with tables arranged in a U-shape around a central fire pit. Hundreds of wolves already sat eating and drinking, their conversations filling the space with noise. Every head turned when Bricenna entered. The servant led her to a table near the head of the room. Dacron sat at the center, elevated above the others on a dais. He watched her approach with those unreadable amber eyes. Bricenna of the Myra, he announced to the hall. My honored guest. Treat her with the respect due to someone under my personal protection. The words were carefully chosen. Not prisoner. Not slave. And under his protection, which meant anyone who harmed her would answer to him. Bricenna was seated at a table with several other wolves. They studied her with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. One of them was Velsia, the silver-haired woman who'd questioned keeping Bricenna alive. So, Velsia said once Bricenna sat down. The little assassin joins us for dinner. Tell me, do you plan to poison anyone tonight, or are you saving that for a special occasion? Several wolves at the table laughed. Bricenna kept her expression neutral. I'm here at your king's invitation. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. Oh, I don't have a problem with it, Velsia said, smiling. I think it's fascinating. Dacron has always had unusual tastes, but this is extraordinary even for him. Keeping his enemies close, they say. Though usually not this close. Velsia. Dacron's voice carried across the hall. Unless you have something productive to say, perhaps you should focus on your meal. The silver-haired wolf bowed her head in acknowledgement, but her eyes promised that this conversation wasn't over. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables in sauces Briseina didn't recognize. After weeks of prison rations, it should have been wonderful. Instead, it tasted like ash in her mouth. She forced herself to eat anyway. Forced herself to sit straight, to meet the eyes of wolves who glared at her, to act as though sitting among her people's predators was perfectly normal. "You're doing well," someone murmured beside her. Briseina turned to find a young female wolf with kind eyes and dark hair. First dinner in the Great Hall is always the hardest. Everyone's staring, judging. But you're holding up better than most would. "Thank you," Briseina said carefully. "You are." "Talvena. I'm one of the king's healers." She offered a small smile. "And before you ask, no, I don't agree with everything Dacron does. But I serve the kingdom, not just the king. Someone has to help heal the wounds, both physical and otherwise." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to Briseina since her arrival. "Why are you being nice to me?" "Because you're going to need at least one person in this place who doesn't want you dead or broken," Talvena said simply. "And because I knew the Bloodsworn. What they were capable of. What they did." She paused. "I'm not saying what you did was right. But I understand why you did it." Before Briseina could respond, Dacron stood. The hall immediately fell silent. "A toast," the Alpha King said, raising his cup. "To strength. To loyalty. To the kingdom that shelters us all." "To the kingdom," the assembled wolves echoed, raising their own cups. Dacron's eyes found Briseina across the room. "And to our guest, who has learned what it means to face the consequences of her actions. May she find wisdom in her time among us." Briseina lifted her cup with everyone else, but didn't drink. She wouldn't toast to the kingdom that had destroyed so many human villages. Wouldn't pretend to honor the wolves who'd killed her people. Dacron noticed. Of course he noticed. But he simply smiled and drank, as if her small defiance amused him. The dinner continued for hours. Wolves told stories of battles and hunts, laughed and argued and displayed their strength through boasts and challenges. Briseina watched it all, learning their dynamics, their hierarchies, their relationships. Knowledge was a weapon. And right now, it was the only weapon she had. As the evening wore on, she noticed patterns. Velsia commanded respect among the older wolves, those who'd fought in the clan wars. Jesric kept to the edges, clearly not fully accepted by the warrior class. Talvena moved between groups easily, her role as healer giving her access everywhere. And Dacron watched everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of tension. The Alpha King missed nothing. Finally, as the crowd began to disperse, Dacron gestured for Briseina to approach the dais. She walked forward, aware of every eye tracking her movement. "You didn't drink the toast," Dacron said quietly when she stood before him. "I don't toast to kingdoms built on conquest." "Careful. That sounds dangerously close to defiance." "You said I was your guest. Don't guests have the right to their own opinions?" Dacron laughed, genuinely surprised. "You have courage, I'll give you that. Most people in your position would be trying to appease me, to earn my favor. But not you. You can't help but push back. Would you respect me if I didn't?" The question hung in the air between them. Dacron studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "No, I suppose I wouldn't. Which is unfortunate, because it would be easier for both of us if you were the type to break quickly." He stood and descended from the dais, moving closer to her. "But you're not that type, are you? You're the type who'll endure, who'll adapt, who'll find ways to survive no matter what I do to you. You're like a wolf in that way. Resilient. Don't compare me to your kind." "Why not? We're not so different. Both predators in our own ways. Both willing to kill to protect what we love." He circled her slowly. "The only difference is that I have the power to act on that willingness and you don't. For now." He stopped in front of her again. Go. Tomorrow, you'll begin learning what it truly means to live among wolves. I have plans for you, Briseina. Interesting plans. She didn't like the sound of that, but she bowed slightly, the bare minimum of respect, and left the hall. Jesric caught up with her in the corridor. That was either very brave or very stupid, refusing his toast. Probably both. Briseina kept walking, suddenly exhausted. He's testing me, seeing how far he can push before I break. I'm not going to give him the satisfaction. Just be careful. Dacron's patience isn't infinite. They reached her room and Jesric left her with a warning to lock the door. Briseina did, then collapsed onto the bed, still fully clothed. She'd survived her first dinner among wolves. Had navigated the politics, the hostility, the constant threat of violence. It was exhausting in a way that physical labor never was. But she'd also learned things. Seen cracks in the court's unity. Found potential allies in Jesric and Talvena. Discovered that Dacron's control wasn't as absolute as he wanted people to believe. Small victories. Tiny ones really. But victories nonetheless. As she drifted toward sleep, Briseina thought about the choice Jesric had laid out. Give up or be patient. Break or endure. She chose endurance. Not because she forgave Dacron or accepted her fate, but because endurance meant survival, and survival meant opportunity. And eventually, opportunities could be turned into weapons. Just like poison in a cup of tea. Part 6, The Game of Shadows. The next 3 months became a strange sort of existence. Briseina lived in the palace, ate with the court, walked the gardens, and played the role of Dacron's peculiar guest. She learned the rhythms of wolf society, the unspoken rules that govern their interactions. Wolves respected strength above all else. Not just physical strength, though that mattered, but strength of will, of character, of conviction. A wolf who stood firm in their beliefs, even if those beliefs were unpopular, earned more respect than one who bent with every wind. So Briseina stopped trying to appease anyone. When Velsia made cutting remarks, she responded with equal sharpness. When other court members questioned her presence, she met their eyes without flinching. When Dacron pushed, she pushed back. It was dangerous. But it worked. You're starting to act like one of us, Talvena observed one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. The healer had become something close to a friend, though Briseina was careful never to fully trust anyone in this place. I'm learning to survive among you, Briseina corrected. That's different. Is it? Talvena plucked a flower from one of the garden beds, studying its petals. You stand straighter now. Speak with more confidence. You've even started winning arguments with some of the younger wolves. They respect you whether they want to admit it or not. They respect that I killed the Bloodsworn. It makes me dangerous. Exactly. And wolves respect danger. Talvena turned to face her. Have you thought about what you'll do if Dacron offers you a real position here? If he asks you to serve the kingdom in some capacity? Why would he do that? Because you're wasted as a prisoner. You're intelligent, resourceful, and you understand humans better than any wolf could. Those are valuable skills. Talvena's expression turned serious. Dacron's not stupid. He knows that breaking you serves no purpose. But turning you into an asset? That's much more useful. The thought made Briseina's stomach turn. I would never serve him willingly. You're already serving him. You attend his dinners, follow his rules, play his games. The only question is whether you'll do it grudgingly or whether you'll find a way to make it work in your favor. Before Briseina could respond, a servant rushed into the garden. Lady Briseina, the king requests your presence immediately. In his war room. Briseina and Talvena exchanged glances. The war room was where Dacron planned his campaigns, made strategic decisions. Prisoners didn't get summoned there. Go, Talvena urged. And remember, everything in that room is a test. The war room was on the palace's top floor, a circular chamber with maps covering every wall. A large table dominated the center, with markers representing various territories and forces. Dacron stood studying one of the maps, with Velsia and 2 other commanders beside him. Briseina, Dacron said without turning around. Come here. I need your knowledge. She approached cautiously. My knowledge of what? Humans. Specifically, the scattered clans. He gestured to the map, which showed the mountain regions where Brisena's people lived. We've been pushing into these territories for months, but progress has been slower than expected. Villages disappear before we arrive. Supply caches vanish. Scouts get picked off by traps we never see coming. They're not stupid, Brisena said. You burned enough of them that the rest learned to hide. Obviously. The question is where? These mountains are vast, with countless caves and valleys. Finding them all would take years. Dacron finally looked at her. But you know these people. You understand how they think. Where would they hide? Brisena stared at him. You want me to help you hunt down my own people? I want you to help me end this conflict with minimal bloodshed. The longer these clans hide, the more desperate they become. Desperate people make stupid choices. They'll raid our supply lines, ambush our patrols, and eventually we'll have no choice but to exterminate them completely. He moved closer to her. But if we can find them quickly, peacefully, we can offer terms. Resettlement. Protection. A chance to live under our rule rather than die in the mountains. You mean slavery? I mean survival, Dacron countered. The scattered clans can't win this war. You know that as well as I do. The only question is how many of them die before they accept it. Velsia spoke up. My king, with respect, asking a human to betray her own kind is foolish. She'll feed us false information, lead us into traps. Will you? Dacron asked Brisena directly. This was the test Talvena had warned about. If she refused, she'd prove she couldn't be trusted, and Dacron would have no reason to keep her comfortable. But if she agreed, she'd be helping the wolves destroy the last free human settlements in the region. I'll help, Brisena said slowly. On one condition. Dacron raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to make demands. Hear me out. I'll tell you where the clans are most likely hiding. But in return, you give me your word that any settlements we find will be offered peaceful terms. No massacres. No burning villages. You give them a real choice to surrender or relocate. And if they refuse? Then you do what you're going to do anyway. But at least give them the choice first. The room was silent. Velsia looked disgusted. The other commanders seemed skeptical. But Dacron studied Brisena with something that might have been approval. Done, he said. You have my word. Any settlement you help us find will be offered terms before we attack. Your word is alpha? Binding and unbreakable? His eyes flashed. Careful. Asking an alpha to swear an oath is not done lightly. Neither is betraying my own people. Dacron smiled then, sharp and dangerous. My word as alpha. I will offer peaceful terms to any settlement you identify before taking hostile action. Satisfied? No, Brisena thought. But it was better than nothing. She turned to the map, studying the mountain regions. The caves near Rothgar's Peak. There's a network of tunnels there that leads to a hidden valley. Fresh water, good hunting, easily defended. If I were hiding a large group, that's where I'd go. Dacron marked the location. Where else? Over the next hour, Brisena identified 5 potential hiding spots. Places she remembered from her childhood, from stories the elders told, from her own travels through the mountains. Each location would give the scattered clans a fighting chance at survival if Dacron kept his word. And if he didn't, well, she'd find a way to make him regret it. Excellent, Dacron said when they finished. We'll scout these locations starting tomorrow. You'll accompany us. What? Brisena's head snapped up. You heard me. You're coming with the scouting parties. I want you there when we contact these settlements. Your presence might convince them to surrender peacefully. Or it might convince them I'm a traitor. That's a risk you'll have to take. Dacron rolled up the map. Dismissed, all of you. Brisena, stay. The commanders filed out, Velsia shooting Brisena a look that promised trouble later. Then she and Dacron were alone. You manipulated me, Dacron said once they were gone. Turn my request for help into a bargain that benefits you. That took skill. I learned from the best manipulator I know. He laughed. Touché. But don't think I don't see what you're doing. You're trying to save your people by working within the system. Noble. Also ultimately futile. Why? Because even if these clans surrender peacefully, even if we resettle them without violence, you've still helped me conquer them. You've still betrayed the scattered clan's last hope of freedom. And that guilt will eat at you for the rest of your life. Bree Senna met his eyes. At least they'll be alive to hate me for it. Will they thank you for that? Or will they curse your name for choosing survival over freedom? It was a question Bree Senna had been asking herself since the moment she agreed to help. She didn't have a good answer. I made a choice, she said quietly. It might be the wrong one, but it's better than sitting back and watching everyone die. Dacron studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He poured 2 glasses of wine and offered her one. This time she took it. To difficult choices, Dacron said, raising his glass. To survival, Bree Senna countered. They drank. The wine was good, rich and smooth. Bree Senna hated that she noticed. You're stronger than I expected, Dacron said, setting down his glass. When I first captured you, I thought you'd break within weeks. Beg for mercy, for freedom, for anything. But you haven't. You've adapted. Learned. Found ways to fight back even from a position of complete powerlessness. It's impressive. Is that why you keep me around? Because I amuse you. Partly. Also because you're useful. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I respect you. Not as a friend, not even as an equal, but as a worthy opponent. You killed the Bloodsworn, survived captivity, and now you're finding ways to help your people even while serving me. That takes a rare combination of intelligence and determination. Your respect means nothing to me. I know, which is exactly why it's worth something. Before she could process that, he moved to the door. Get some rest. We leave at dawn. The journey to Hrothgar's Peak takes 3 days, and it won't be comfortable. He left her alone in the war room, surrounded by maps of conquered territories and plans for future conquests. Bree Senna looked down at the wine glass in her hand. Half full, or half empty, depending on perspective. She'd just agreed to help the wolves find her people's hiding places. Had traded information for promises that might or might not be kept. Had become exactly what she'd sworn never to be, a collaborator. But those people at Hrothgar's Peak, if they were really there, would get a chance to surrender instead of burning. Children would live instead of die. That had to count for something, didn't it? Bree Senna drained the wine in one long swallow, trying to wash away the taste of compromise. It didn't work. What price would you pay to save lives? And would those lives thank you for the bargain? The journey to Hrothgar's Peak was brutal. They traveled light and fast, 20 wolves including Dacron, Velsia, Jesric, and Bree Senna. The terrain grew rougher with each day, mountain paths giving way to sheer cliffs and treacherous ice fields. Bree Senna had grown up in these mountains, but even she struggled to keep pace with the wolves. Their supernatural stamina made them tireless, and more than once she had to push herself beyond exhaustion just to avoid falling behind. On the second night, as they made camp in a narrow canyon, Jesric approached her with food. You're pushing yourself too hard. If you collapse, Dacron won't wait for you to recover. Then I won't collapse. Bree Senna took the dried meat he offered, chewing mechanically. How much further? We should reach Hrothgar's Peak by tomorrow afternoon. If there's anyone hiding there, we'll know soon enough. He sat down beside her. Are you sure about this? Once we find them, there's no going back. I was never sure. But it's too late now. Bree Senna. He waited until she looked at him. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you're trying to save lives. Even if it doesn't feel that way. Even if they hate you for it. Before she could respond, Velsia's voice cut through the camp. How touching. The half-breed and the human, bonding over their shared weakness. Jesric tensed but didn't rise to the bait. He'd learned, Bree Senna noticed, to ignore Velsia's provocations. But Bree Senna was tired and stressed and in no mood for games. She stood and walked over to where Velsia sat sharpening her blade. You have something you want to say to me? Just making an observation. You and Jesric, always whispering in corners. One has to wonder what you're planning. We're not planning anything. Unlike you, who seems to spend all her time plotting ways to undermine Dacron's decisions. Several wolves nearby went quiet, watching the confrontation. Velsia's eyes narrowed. Careful, human. That sounds dangerously close to an accusation. It's an observation. Like yours. Brisena held her ground even as Velsia stood, towering over her. You questioned keeping me alive from the beginning. You've opposed every decision Dacron's made regarding the scattered clans. And now you're here, supposedly helping with this mission, but really you're just waiting for me to fail so you can say, I told you so. You think you understand our politics because you've spent a few months in the palace? Velsia's voice was cold. You're a prisoner playing at being a courtier. Don't forget what you really are. I haven't forgotten. Have you forgotten that Dacron ordered everyone to treat me with respect? Respect has to be earned. Then earn mine by shutting up and doing your job. The silence that followed was absolute. Brisena had just told one of Dacron's senior commanders to shut up. In front of witnesses. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Then Dacron's voice drifted from across the camp. Ladies, as entertaining as this is, we have an early start tomorrow. Save your energy for the mission. It wasn't quite a reprimand, but the message was clear. Stand down. Velsia held Brisena's gaze for another moment, then turned away. Soon, she said quietly enough that only Brisena could hear. Soon you'll make a mistake, and when you do, I'll be there. Brisena returned to her bedroll, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. Jesric gave her a look that said, What were you thinking? But didn't speak. She lay awake long after the camp quieted, staring up at the stars. Tomorrow they'd reach Hrothgar's peak. Tomorrow she'd find out if she'd made the right choice or condemned her people to a different kind of death. Dawn came cold and gray. They broke camp quickly and began the final ascent. The path grew treacherous, winding along cliff faces where one wrong step meant a fatal fall. Brisena's muscles screamed in protest, but she kept moving. By midday, they reached a plateau overlooking a hidden valley. And there, nestled against the mountainside, was exactly what Brisena had predicted, a settlement. Smoke rose from hidden caves. Lookouts were posted at strategic points. From this distance, she could see people moving about, maybe 200 of them, living in the valley's protection. You were right, Dacron said, studying the settlement through a spyglass. They're there. Organized, defended, prepared for a siege if necessary. So what now? Velsia asked. Now we offer terms as promised. Dacron handed the spyglass to Brisena. Look closely. Do you recognize anyone? Brisena raised the glass to her eye and scanned the settlement. At first, she saw only strangers. But then she spotted a figure near the central fire, an older man with a distinctive limp. Her blood went cold. Orlen, she whispered. The elder from your village? Dacron asked. She nodded, unable to speak. Orlen was supposed to be in the Myra. How had he ended up here? Unless Themra's survivors had fled after all, had made their way to this hidden valley seeking shelter. Which meant the people down there were her people. Perfect, Dacron said. Then they'll recognize you. We're going to pay them a visit. Wait. Brisena lowered the spyglass. You promised peaceful terms. But if they see me with you, surrounded by wolves, they'll think I've betrayed them. They won't listen. Then convince them otherwise. How? Dacron smiled. That's your problem to solve. They descended toward the valley, making no attempt to hide their approach. The settlement's lookouts spotted them immediately. Warning horns sounded, and people scrambled to defensive positions. By the time Dacron's party reached the valley floor, they were facing a nervous but determined group of humans armed with spears, bows, and desperate courage. Orlen stood at the front, his face gray with shock when he saw Brisena. No, the old man said. No, Brisena, what have you done? I've bought you time, Brisena called back. She stepped forward, away from the wolves, her hands raised and empty. Please, Orlen, listen to me. These wolves aren't here to attack. They're here to offer terms. Terms? Like the terms they offered Kelmar before burning it? Like the terms they gave Rothina? A woman's voice, hard with anger. Rihanna stepped into view, the same scout who'd helped Bri-Senna escape the village. We know what wolf terms mean. Death or slavery. Not this time. Bri-Senna kept walking forward until she stood between the two groups. I made Dacron swear an oath. As Alpha. Binding and unbreakable. He'll offer you real choices. Relocation to protected lands. Autonomy within the kingdom. A chance to live without fear of raids. And all we have to do is bow to the Wolf King, Orlan said bitterly. Accept his rule. Become his subjects. Yes. That's not freedom, Bri-Senna. That's surrender. I know. Her voice cracked slightly. But it's survival. And right now, that's all I can give you. Murmurs ran through the assembled humans. Some looked tempted. Others looked betrayed. Dacron stepped forward, and everyone tensed. But he made no aggressive moves, simply stood beside Bri-Senna and addressed the crowd. I am Dacron, Alpha King of the Wolf Clans. My armies have conquered most of these territories. Soon, we'll control all of them. You cannot hide forever. Cannot run forever. Eventually, we'll find every hidden valley, every secret cave. And when we do, you'll face a choice, surrender or die. He gestured to the settlement around them. But you're not there yet. Right now, you have leverage. You have time. And I'm offering you something rare, a genuine choice before the violence begins. Swear loyalty to my kingdom. Accept resettlement to lands where you can farm and live in peace. In return, you'll have my protection. No raids. No burnings. You'll be subjects of the kingdom, yes, but you'll be alive. Why should we trust you? Rihanna demanded. You're a wolf. Wolves lie. Wolves keep our oaths, Dacron corrected. Especially oaths sworn as Alpha. If I promise you protection and break that promise, any wolf in my kingdom can challenge me for leadership. It's our law, older than this kingdom. I don't make oaths lightly. Orlan looked at Bri-Senna. Is this true? Did he really swear an oath? Yes. I was there. I made him swear it. Bri-Senna took a deep breath. I know what I'm asking. I know how it looks. But I've spent months living among them, learning their ways. This oath is real. And it might be the only chance we get. We. Velsia said from behind Dacron. You're not one of them anymore, human. You belong to the wolves now. The words stung because they held truth. Bri-Senna wasn't part of the scattered clans anymore. Wasn't part of anything except Dacron's strange game. But Orlan saw through it. She's still one of us. Always will be. The old man stepped forward, leaning on his walking stick. I was there when she left to kill the Bloodsworn. I watched her walk toward certain death to buy us time. Everything she's done since has been to protect us. So if Bri-Senna says this oath is real, I believe her. You can't be serious, Rihanna protested. We've fought too hard, hidden too long. We can't just give up now. We're not giving up. We're surviving. Orlan turned to face his people. Look at us. We're starving. Our children are sick. We've been living in caves for months, always afraid, always running. Is this the life we want? Is this freedom? It's better than slavery. Is it? The old man's voice was sad. I'm tired, Rihanna. Tired of running, tired of watching people die for a freedom that might not even exist anymore. Maybe it's time to try something different. The argument continued for over an hour. Some humans wanted to fight. Others wanted to flee deeper into the mountains. But a significant number, especially those with children, started to see the logic in Orlan's words. Finally, as the sun began to set, a vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. But it was enough. The settlement would accept Dacron's terms. Bri-Senna felt relief and guilt in equal measure. She'd saved these people from immediate death. But she'd also helped the wolves conquer them. The faces of those who'd voted against the surrender, the ones who saw her as a traitor, would haunt her. Especially Rihanna, who looked at her with such disappointment before walking away. Dacron handled the formal surrender with surprising dignity. He laid out the terms clearly. The settlement would relocate to lands in the kingdom's southern territory, maintain limited self-governance, pay moderate taxes, and provide scouts when requested. In return, they'd have protection from raids, access to trade, and freedom to keep their culture and traditions. It was more generous than Bri-Sena had expected. Perhaps Dacron really did want to end the conflict peacefully. Or perhaps he just wanted to appear merciful while still winning. As night fell and the details were finalized, Orlen pulled Bri-Sena aside. Was it worth it? Everything you sacrificed. I don't know yet, she admitted. Ask me in a year. Or 10. The Bloodsworn's deaths sent shockwaves through the kingdom, you know. Word spread about the woman who poisoned 3 of the greatest warriors. Some humans see you as a hero, others as a fool. But everyone knows your name. And what do you see me as? A daughter trying to save her family. Orlen pulled her into a hug. Whatever happens, whatever you become, remember that. Bri-Sena held on to him, letting herself be weak for just a moment. Then she pulled away and straightened her shoulders. She still had to survive Dacron's court. Had to navigate wolf politics. Had to somehow stay alive long enough to see if any of this meant anything. The journey back to Vargoth was quieter. The mission had succeeded, and even Velsia seemed grudgingly satisfied. They'd found a hidden settlement, secured its surrender, and done it without spilling blood. But as Bri-Sena walked through the mountain paths, she felt the weight of what she'd done settling on her shoulders. She'd helped the wolves conquer her people. Had betrayed the scattered clan's last hope of true freedom. And the worst part was she couldn't even regret it fully. Because those people were alive. Orlen was alive. The children playing in the caves would grow up instead of dying in the snow. That had to count for something. On the second night of their return journey, Dacron walked with her away from the main camp. They stood on a cliff overlooking the darkened valleys below. You did well, he said. Your people trusted you enough to listen. That's valuable. Don't pretend this was about my value. You wanted another settlement conquered. I helped you accomplish it. True. But you also saved lives. Including people you care about. That old man, Orlen. He would have died in a wolf attack within months. Now he'll live to see his grandchildren grow up in safety. In your kingdom. Under your rule. Is that really so terrible? Dacron turned to face her. Look at what we've built. Vargoth is prosperous, ordered, strong. My people don't starve. They don't fear raiders or bandits. They live under laws that protect them. Is that not worth something? It's worth a lot. For wolves. But you built it on human blood. Every kingdom is built on blood. Human kingdoms included. Or do you think your ancestors settled these mountains peacefully? He moved closer. The only difference between us is that we're honest about what we are. We don't pretend our strength is somehow noble or our conquests justified by destiny. We're predators. We take what we need to survive. At least we admit it. Bri-Sena had no good answer to that. So she changed the subject. What happens when we get back to Vargoth? Will you send me back to the cells now that I've served my purpose? No. You've proven too useful for that. Dacron studied her in the moonlight. I'm going to give you a position in my court. A real one. Advisor on human affairs. You'll help negotiate with other settlements, help integrate the relocated clans into the kingdom. Make sure the transition is as peaceful as possible. You're making me a collaborator. Officially. I'm giving you power. The power to actually help your people instead of just surviving day to day. Isn't that what you want? It was a trap. Bri-Sena could see it clearly. Accept the position and she'd become Dacron's tool, used to subjugate her own kind. Refuse and she'd lose any ability to influence how humans were treated in the kingdom. Damn him. He'd thought this through perfectly. I'll need guarantees, she said finally. If I take this position, I want binding promises about how relocated settlements will be treated. No forced labor. No separating families. Children get educated alongside wolf children. And any human who commits a crime gets a fair trial, not summary execution. Done. Just like that. Just like that. Those terms are reasonable and actually make governing easier. Happy subjects cause fewer problems. He extended his hand. So, do we have an agreement? Bri-Sena looked at his outstretched hand. Taking it would change everything. would make her complicit in the kingdom's expansion in ways she couldn't undo. But it would also give her a voice. A way to protect the humans who'd already been conquered and those who would be in the future. She took his hand. "We have an agreement." Dacron's grip was firm, his skin warm despite the cold night air. "Welcome to the court, Advisor Brisena. I think this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership." As they walked back to camp, Brisena tried to ignore the feeling that she'd just sold her soul. Or at least rented it out for a cause she told herself was worth the price. Time would tell if she was right. 6 months passed. 6 months of Brisena establishing herself in her new role, negotiating with settlements, overseeing relocations, fighting for every small protection she could win for human subjects. It was exhausting, frustrating work that left her drained by the end of each day. But it was also effective. 3 more settlements surrendered peacefully under her mediation. Families stayed together during relocations. Human children began attending schools in Vargoth. It wasn't freedom, but it was survival with dignity. And slowly, grudgingly, the Wolf Court began to respect her. "You've accomplished more than I expected," Velsia admitted one evening after a particularly successful negotiation. The silver-haired wolf still didn't like Brisena, but she'd stopped actively undermining her. "The southern territories are stabilizing faster than any military campaign could have achieved." "People respond better to hope than fear," Brisena replied. "Debatable. But in this case, it seems to be working." The real surprise was Dacron. The Alpha King had kept every promise, supported her initiatives, and given her genuine authority. He'd even overruled other wolves when they tried to impose harsher terms on human settlements. It was disconcerting. Brisena kept waiting for the trap to spring, for him to reveal this was all an elaborate game. But months passed and he remained consistent. "You're confused," Talvena observed one day as they walked through the palace gardens. "You expected Dacron to betray you, but he hasn't. Now you don't know what to think. He killed thousands of my people. He keeps me here against my will. How am I supposed to reconcile that with the fact that he's actually helping me protect humans now?" "By understanding that people are complicated. Dacron can be cruel and fair, violent and just a conqueror and a builder. He contains contradictions like everyone else." Talvena paused by a fountain. "The question is, can you work with someone like that? Or will the contradictions tear you apart?" Brisena didn't have an answer. That night, there was a celebration in the Great Hall. Some victory in the eastern territories that the wolves were commemorating. Brisena attended as was now expected of her position, wearing the formal robes of a court advisor. She'd grown used to these events. The noise, the drinking, the displays of strength and dominance. She'd even learned to enjoy parts of it. The stories were often entertaining, and some of the wolves were surprisingly good company when they weren't threatening to kill people. Advisor Brisena. A young wolf named Corvin stumbled over, clearly drunk. "Tell us about the Bloodsworn. What were they like when you poisoned them?" The hall went quiet. It was the first time anyone had directly asked her about that night. For months, the topic had been carefully avoided. "Corvin, that's inappropriate," Jestrix said sharply. "No, it's fine." Brisena stood, her voice carrying across the hall. "You want to know what it was like? It was terrifying. I walked into their tent knowing I would probably die. My hands shook so badly I almost spilled the poison. And when it worked, when they actually died, I felt sick. Not triumphant. Not proud. Just sick." She met Dacron's eyes across the room. "I killed 3 warriors who were your friends, my king. I won't apologize for it because my people were dying. But I won't celebrate it either. What I did was necessary and terrible. And I'll carry that weight for the rest of my life." The silence stretched. Then Dacron stood and raised his cup. "To honest enemies, who fight for what they believe in, even when it costs them everything." It was the closest thing to forgiveness she'd ever get from him. The hall drank to the toast, and the celebration resumed. Later, as the crowd began to disperse, Dacron gestured for Brisena to follow him. They walked to one of the palace balconies overlooking the city. "That was well done," he said. "You acknowledged what you did without groveling or making excuses. The court respects that." I don't care about their respect. Lie. You've worked hard to earn it. Don't pretend otherwise. He leaned against the balcony railing. I've been thinking about something. Your service agreement. The one where you pledged to belong to me completely. Brisenna's stomach tightened. What about it? I'm releasing you from it. She stared at him. What? You've fulfilled your end of the bargain. Your village is safe, thriving even. You've helped me secure peaceful surrenders from multiple settlements. You've earned your freedom. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. This is an official pardon. It grants you full rights as a citizen of the kingdom. You can leave Vargoth whenever you want. Go wherever you want. You're no longer my prisoner or my property. Brisenna took the document with shaking hands. This had to be a trick. Dacron didn't just free prisoners, especially ones who'd killed his closest friends. Why? She asked. Because keeping you as a prisoner was becoming counterproductive. The human settlements trust you because you're one of them. But if word spreads that you're doing this under duress, that trust evaporates. Giving you freedom makes you more effective, not less. So it's just another strategic move. Is it? Dacron's expression was unreadable. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing you flinch every time I enter a room. Maybe I respect what you've accomplished enough to grant you the freedom you've earned. Maybe I've realized that some cages are invisible and some freedoms are illusions and the difference matters less than I thought. He turned to face the city. You'll stay, of course. As my advisor. Because this work is important and you're good at it. But you'll stay by choice, not by compulsion. That's the difference. Brisenna looked down at the pardon, at the official seal that would change her entire existence. Free. After a year of captivity, she was actually free. What if I choose to leave? She asked quietly. Then you leave. I won't stop you. Though I will point out that walking away means abandoning all the humans who've come to rely on you. The settlements you've protected. The families you've kept together. They need you even if I don't. It was manipulation, but it was also true. Brisenna had built something here. Had created systems that protected vulnerable people. If she left, those systems might collapse. I hate that you're right, she said. I'm usually right. You'll get used to it. Despite everything, Brisenna smiled. I'll stay. For now. But as an advisor who can quit, not a prisoner who has to obey. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to find your defiance irritating. And I reserve the right not to care. They stood in companionable silence, looking out over Vargoth. A year ago, Brisenna would never have imagined this moment. Standing beside the Wolf King as an equal, or at least closer to equal than she'd ever thought possible. You asked me once if I regretted killing the Bloodsworn, Brisenna said. I've thought about that question a lot. The answer is complicated. I regret the necessity of it. I regret that my people were pushed so far that murder felt like the only option. But I don't regret trying to save them. Even if it cost me everything, even if it made me into something I never wanted to be. Dacron was quiet for a long moment. I dream about them sometimes. Griver. Asander. In the dreams, they're still alive, and we're planning campaigns like we used to. Then I wake up and remember they're gone. And I remember why. I'm sorry, Brisenna said, and meant it. But apologies don't bring the dead back. He straightened, some of his formal demeanor returning. Get some rest. Tomorrow we're meeting with representatives from 3 more settlements. They're considering surrender, and your presence will help convince them. You mean I'm going to help you conquer more of my people? I mean you're going to save more lives by ensuring those conquests happen peacefully. He headed toward the door, then paused. There's a difference, Brisenna. You've chosen to see it. That's not weakness or betrayal. It's wisdom. After he left, Brisenna stayed on the balcony, holding her pardon and watching the city below. Free. She was free. So why didn't it feel different? Maybe because true freedom wasn't about legal documents or broken chains. It was about choices. And every choice came with consequences, with costs, with compromises that stained your soul. She'd killed the Bloodsworn to save her people. She'd surrendered to save her village. She'd helped Dacron conquer settlements to protect the people being conquered. Each choice had cost her something. her innocence, her freedom, her certainty that she was one of the good ones. But those choices had also saved lives. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Was that worth the price? Brisena still didn't know. But she'd keep paying it. Because someone had to. Because walking away would mean abandoning people who needed protection. Because she'd started down this path and couldn't see another way forward. Below, Vargoth sparkled with lights. The city of wolves, built on conquest and blood. But also on law, order, and a strange kind of justice. It was a complicated place. Contradictory. Just like its king. Just like her. Brisena folded the pardon and placed it in her pocket. Tomorrow she'd return to work, negotiating with settlements, protecting humans where she could, making compromises that kept people alive. It wasn't the future she'd imagined when she walked into that camp to poison the Bloodsworn. It wasn't heroic or glorious or even particularly noble. But it was hers. And she'd make the most of it. One choice at a time. One life saved at a time. One day at a time. Until either the kingdom changed, or she did, or the world ended. Whichever came first. Epilogue. 2 years later, Brisena stood on the palace balcony again. This time, she wasn't alone. The northern settlements have agreed to terms, Talvena said, reviewing a stack of documents. With your mediation, they'll relocate to the eastern valleys. That's every major human settlement in the region now integrated into the kingdom. Conquered, you mean, Brisena said, though without the bitterness that would have colored those words 2 years ago. Integrated. Conquered. The words matter less than the result. Talvena set down the documents. You've accomplished something remarkable. The human territories transitioned with minimal bloodshed. Families stayed together. Culture was preserved. Children are being educated. It's more than anyone expected. It's also not freedom. No. But it's survival with dignity. Sometimes that's the best we can hope for. Jesric joined them, looking tired but satisfied. The council meeting went well. Your proposal for human representation in local governance passed. Not by much, but it passed. 3 humans will sit on regional councils starting next month. Progress, Brisena said. Slow, frustrating, insufficient progress. But progress. You've changed the kingdom, Jesric said seriously. Made it more than just wolves ruling over conquered territories. You've built something that might actually last. We'll see. Brisena gathered the documents. I need to report to Dacron. He'll want to know about the northern settlements. She found the Alpha King in his study, surrounded by maps and reports. He looked up when she entered, and something that might have been warmth flickered in his amber eyes. Advisor, I hear we've secured the last of the northern settlements. Yeah. The transitions will begin next month. She set her report on his desk. This war is over, Dacron. Every settlement has either surrendered or been integrated. The scattered clans as they existed are gone. And in their place? Something new. Something we're still figuring out. She moved to the window. Human communities within the Wolf Kingdom. It's unprecedented. Fragile. But it might actually work. It will work because you're making it work. Dacron joined her at the window. You've become indispensable to this kingdom. The court respects you. The humans trust you. You've built bridges I didn't think were possible. Don't make me out to be some kind of hero. I helped you conquer my people. You helped me save them from extermination. There's a difference. They'd had this argument dozens of times. Brisena had stopped trying to win it. What happens now? She asked instead. The war is over. The settlements are secured. What's next for the kingdom? Building. Growing. Learning to be something more than just warriors. Dacron's voice was thoughtful. With your help, perhaps we can become a kingdom where wolves and humans coexist rather than one simply ruling the other. That's ambitious. I'm an ambitious wolf. Despite everything, Brisena smiled. Yes. You are. They stood in silence, watching the sun set over Vargoth. A city of wolves. A kingdom of predators. But also, now, a place where humans lived with a measure of safety and dignity. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what Bree Senna had dreamed of when she was young and believed in clear lines between good and evil. It was messy and complicated and full of compromises that stained her soul. But it was also real. And it was saving lives. In the end, maybe that was enough. I still dream about them, Dacron said suddenly. The Bloodsworn. Less often now, but I still dream. I dream about them too, Bree Senna admitted. Wonder if I could have found another way. Wonder if any of this was worth their deaths. Was it? I don't know. Ask me in 10 years. Or 20. When we see what this kingdom becomes. Dacron nodded slowly. Fair enough. As night fell over Vargoth, Bree Senna thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a farmer's daughter to an assassin to a prisoner to an advisor. Each transformation had cost her something. Each choice had taken its toll. But she was still standing. Still fighting, even if the battles looked different now. Still trying to protect her people, even if the methods would have horrified her younger self. She'd killed the Alpha King's best warriors to save her people. And in response, he'd captured her, broken her, and then rebuilt her into something neither of them had expected. It wasn't the ending she'd wanted. But it was the ending they'd made together, one choice at a time, one compromise at a time. And somehow, against all odds, it might actually be enough. The woman who'd walked into fire had survived the flames. Changed by them, marked by them, but still herself at the core. Still fighting. Still hoping. Still believing that somewhere in all the darkness and compromise and necessary evils, there was a path toward something better. She'd find it. Eventually. Or die trying. Either way, she wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. Because that's what survivors did. They endured. They adapted. They found ways to keep going even when every instinct screamed to quit. And Bree Senna had proven, if nothing else, that she was a survivor. The story of the woman who killed the Bloodsworn and lived to shape a kingdom had only just begun. The end.